Excuse me, sir, I need you to pack your things.
Why? I'm just waiting for my flight. What's the problem?
There is an issue with your lounge access. I need your pass immediately.
An issue? I scanned my pass at the front desk. Verify it with them.
What you're looking at right now, that's bodycam footage. And that man sitting at the table, hand raised, calm voice, trying to explain himself to a police officer. That's Judge Marcus Whitfield. Senior court judge, over 2 decades on the bench. He's not under arrest. He hasn't broken any law. He hasn't raised his voice or made a single threat. He's sitting in an airport lounge with a laptop, pastry, a glass of water, and he's telling the officer the same thing he's already said twice. I scanned at the desk. Verify with them. Simple, reasonable, true. But that officer isn't moving, isn't checking, isn't listening. Now let's go back to how this morning actually started. It was 7:47 a.m. inside the Pinnacle Executive Lounge at Hartsfield Carver International Airport. Quiet, expensive, the kind of place that felt like it was always whispering, "You earned this." Soft lighting, leather chairs, the smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries in the air. Outside the wide windows, planes sat on a gray, misty tarmac, engines humming low. About 40 people were inside. Business travelers, frequent flyers, nobody loud, nobody out of order. In the far corner, one man sitting alone at a small table. Marcus Whitfield, 53 years old, charcoal suit, white shirt, reading glasses low on his nose, a legal pad in front of him covered in neat handwriting. A thick folder he had been working through since he sat down. He had scanned his pass at the front desk. The attendant smiled and waved him through, just like everyone else. But across the lounge, another man glanced over at Marcus, looked him up and down, and felt something he couldn't quite explain. Marcus just seemed off to him, out of place. So he quietly flagged down a lounge attendant and said, "I don't want to cause trouble, but that man in the corner, I don't think he belongs here." The attendant looked over. Suit, folder, laptop, a man doing absolutely nothing wrong. She said she'd look into it. The man nodded, then picked up his phone. At 7:53 a.m., he called airport security, and that one phone call was about to change everything. Marcus Whitfield was not a man who drew attention to himself. At 54 years old, he had spent over 2 decades as a senior state court judge, long enough to know that quiet confidence speaks louder than noise ever could. He sat in the far corner of the Pinnacle Executive Lounge, laptop open, reading glasses low on his nose, working through the keynote address he was set to deliver at the National Judicial Leadership Conference later that day. His suit was dark charcoal, well-fitted, modest, expensive only if you knew what to look for. His coffee sat beside him, half-finished and forgotten. He wasn't bothering anyone. He was simply working. 12 tables away, a man glanced over at Marcus, then glanced again. He couldn't name what bothered him. Marcus wasn't loud, wasn't pacing, hadn't broken a single rule, but something he couldn't quite put into words, made him uncomfortable. So when a lounge attendant passed his table, he leaned in and spoke quietly. "I don't want to make a scene, but that man in the corner, I don't think he belongs in here. Could someone check?" The attendant looked across the room. She saw a man in a suit, working quietly at a laptop. She said she'd look into it, and instead of walking over to simply verify Marcus's access, she mentioned it to her supervisor. Her supervisor passed it to the front desk. The front desk logged it as an unverified complaint, and that complaint automatically triggered a security notification. No accusation, no rule broken, no evidence of anything, just one man's feeling. At 7:58 a.m., Officer Bradley Connors received the alert and started walking toward the lounge. Marcus never looked up from his screen. Officer Bradley Connors had been working airport police detail for 11 years. In that time, he had collected 3 formal complaints from members of the public, all citing aggressive conduct. None of those complaints had ever resulted in disciplinary action. Not a written warning, not a review, nothing. So Bradley had learned, without anyone ever saying it directly, that his instincts were trusted. He walked toward the Pinnacle Executive Lounge that morning with his shoulders squared and his mind already made up. He hadn't spoken to the lounge attendant, hadn't pulled up the access logs, hadn't asked a single question of any staff member who might have told him, in less than 30 seconds, that everything was fine. He didn't feel the need. He stepped through the frosted glass doors, scanned the room once, and found Marcus. That was all it took. In the time it takes to blink, Bradley had already formed his conclusion. Not from facts, not from any evidence, just from what he saw and what he assumed about what he saw. He crossed the lounge floor with heavy, deliberate steps. Around him, a few heads turned. The soft morning quiet of the room shifted just slightly, the way a room does when something feels off. Marcus still had his eyes on his laptop screen. He didn't notice Bradley coming until the officer was standing directly over his table, close enough to cast a shadow across the keyboard. Bradley didn't introduce himself, didn't smile, didn't offer any courtesy of any kind. He simply looked down at Marcus and spoke. He told him to pack his belongings and step away from the table. Just like that. No explanation, no greeting, no reason given. And that was how it began. Marcus looked up slowly from his laptop. He studied Bradley's face for a brief moment. The tight jaw, the crossed arms, the stance of a man who had already decided how this conversation was going to go. Then Marcus did something that seemed to frustrate Bradley more than anything else could have. He stayed completely calm. He told Bradley, in a steady and even voice, that he had scanned his boarding pass at the front desk when he walked in. He said the attendant on duty had cleared him. Personally, he suggested politely that Bradley walk over and verify that with the front desk staff, because they would confirm everything he was saying. Simple, reasonable, true. Bradley didn't move toward the front desk. Instead, he asked again, louder this time, for Marcus to gather his belongings. Nearby passengers began to look up from their phones. A woman near the window lowered her coffee cup. Two men in suits exchanged a quiet glance. The soft background hum of the lounge, cutlery, conversation, the distant pull of an espresso machine, slowly faded into something closer to silence. People were watching now. Marcus kept his voice low and measured. He asked Bradley what exactly he was being accused of. He said he had a right to know why he was being asked to leave a lounge he had legally entered. Bradley's response was sharp and immediate. He told Marcus that he was the one asking the questions here. That answer landed hard in the room. A woman 3 tables away reached for her phone and quietly opened her camera. Then another passenger did the same. Then another. Nobody said anything out loud. But the message was clear. People wanted a record of what was happening. Bradley either didn't notice or didn't care. His questions grew sharper. His tone grew harder. And the more reasonable Marcus remained, the more agitated Bradley became, as if Marcus's calmness itself was the problem. And by now, the entire lounge was watching. Bradley reached for his radio. It was a small movement, quick, almost casual. But everyone in that lounge saw it, and everyone understood what it meant. He spoke into it briefly, his voice low and clipped. He requested additional units at the Pinnacle Executive Lounge. Then he clipped the radio back onto his belt and turned back to Marcus as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. The room felt it immediately. Passengers who had been watching now sat completely still. The woman who had raised her phone kept it raised. A man near the back of the lounge leaned over and said something quiet to the person beside him. Renata, the lounge attendant, stood frozen near the service counter, her tray held flat against her side, her eyes moving between Bradley and Marcus with visible unease. Nobody was eating. Nobody was on a call. The lounge that had started the morning feeling like the quietest room in the airport now felt like anything but. Marcus set his pen down slowly. He looked at Bradley and asked him, in the same calm and measured tone he had used since the beginning, why additional officers were being called. He hadn't resisted, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't violated a single rule. So he wanted to understand what exactly was the reason for escalating this situation. Bradley said nothing. He simply looked past Marcus toward the lounge entrance. Less than 4 minutes later, 2 more officers pushed through the frosted glass doors. They moved quickly, eyes scanning the room before landing on Marcus. Sitting at his table, laptop still open, hands visible, expression steady. The sight of 3 officers surrounding one man at a coffee table drew a sharp breath from somewhere in the room. More phones came up. Marcus looked at the 2 new officers, then back at Bradley, and in that moment, something shifted in his understanding of what was happening. This had stopped being about lounge access a long time ago. This was something else entirely. They positioned themselves without saying a word. One officer moved to the left, close to the nearest exit. The second took a step behind Marcus's chair. Bradley remained in front, arms folded, eyes fixed downward on a man who had still not raised his voice once. It was a formation, deliberate and practiced, and every person in that lounge recognized it for exactly what it was. Marcus looked to his left, then slowly turned to confirm what he already suspected was behind him. He took one quiet breath, the kind of breath a man takes when he is deciding how to handle something he never should have had to handle, and then he turned back to Bradley. He asked if he was free to leave. Bradley said no. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Flat. Final. A few passengers visibly reacted. A sharp look, a slow shake of the head, a hand that gripped a phone a little tighter. Marcus held Bradley's gaze and asked his next question with the same steady composure he had carried since the very beginning. He asked if he was being detained. Bradley opened his mouth, then closed it. The hesitation lasted only a few seconds, but in a room full of people recording every moment, a few seconds is a very long time. It was the hesitation of a man who had pushed a situation further than he had a legal justification to push it, and who was only now beginning to realize that fact out loud. He didn't answer clearly. He redirected, told Marcus to remain where he was and that everything would be sorted out shortly. But the crowd had already heard what they needed to hear. No, you can't leave. No clear reason why. No charge. No evidence. No explanation. Just 3 officers and a man sitting at a table with a laptop and a cold cup of coffee. Surrounded like he was dangerous, treated like he was guilty, and given no reason for either. The phones kept recording, and the room kept watching. It was Renata who finally moved. She had been standing near the service counter since the backup arrived. Tray in hand, watching, saying nothing. But something about seeing 3 officers surrounding a man who had done absolutely nothing wrong made her set the tray down quietly and walk across the lounge floor. She stopped a few feet from Bradley and spoke clearly. She told him the guest was authorized, that she had checked him in personally that morning, that she had scanned his boarding pass at the front desk herself and welcomed him into the lounge, just like every other guest who had walked through those doors. The room stilled. This was it. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The simple confirmation that would end all of this. That would send the officers back through those frosted glass doors and let a Tuesday morning go back to being a Tuesday morning. People lowered their phones slightly. Someone exhaled. Bradley looked at Renata. Then he told her to step back and let him do his job. That was it. No follow-up question. No request to see the check-in record. No interest whatsoever in the information she had just handed him. Information that completely dismantled every reason he had for being at that table in the first place. He just dismissed her, and the room could not believe it. A man near the window actually lowered his phone and stared. The 2 officers behind and beside Marcus exchanged a brief glance. Quick, almost invisible, but enough. Even they seemed uncertain now, because Renata hadn't been vague. She hadn't said she thought she remembered him. She said she checked him in, personally, that morning, and Bradley had looked her in the eye and chosen to ignore it. Nobody in that lounge was confused anymore about what kind of situation this really was. Marcus watched Bradley dismiss Renata. He didn't react with anger, didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene. He simply reached into the inside pocket of his charcoal jacket, pulled out his identification, and placed it flat on the table in front of Bradley. Then he spoke. He said it quietly. No arrogance, no theatrics, just a man stating a fact that he felt Bradley needed to have. He told the officer that he served as a senior state court judge, that he had held that position for over 20 years, and that he would very much appreciate being allowed to speak with a supervising officer so that this situation could be handled properly. That was all. The identification sat on the table between them, clear, official, and impossible to misread. Bradley glanced at it. Just a glance. The kind a person gives something they have already decided doesn't matter. He didn't pick it up, didn't examine it, didn't radio anything in or take a single step toward resolving what Renata had already confirmed and what the credentials on that table were now reinforcing. He told Marcus that his request for a supervisor would be noted, and then he told him to stand up. The lounge reacted, not loudly but visibly. A woman shook her head slowly. Someone behind a divider said something under their breath. The two officers flanking Marcus shifted their weight but said nothing. Even they had now seen the identification. Even they understood what was sitting on that table. But Bradley was the lead officer, and Bradley had made his decision. In 11 years, his instincts had never been questioned. Nobody had ever made him feel like he had gotten something wrong. He wasn't about to start believing that now. It was the worst decision he would ever make in uniform. Marcus stood up slowly. He straightened his jacket, picked up his phone and his folder, closed his laptop with one quiet click. Every movement was calm and deliberate, the movements of a man who refused to give anyone in that room a reason to describe him as anything other than composed. He walked toward the exit flanked by 3 officers, and the lounge watched every single step. Phones stayed up the entire way. Nobody tried to hide what they were doing. An older gentleman near the door actually stood as Marcus passed. Not saying a word, just standing, as if the simple act of rising to his feet was the only protest available to him in that moment. The frosted glass doors closed behind them. Within minutes, those videos were moving, shared between contacts, posted on social media, clipped and captioned and pushed across platforms by people who had never set foot in that airport. The footage was clear. A well-dressed black man surrounded by officers in an executive lounge, credentials on the table, a lounge employee confirming his access, and an officer walking him out anyway. The internet did not need long to form an opinion. Inside the security office, the questions continued. Bradley pressed forward, looking for something, anything that would justify what was already on camera. But nothing appeared. No violation, no fraudulent entry, no cause. The access logs were right there. Renata's account was on record. The boarding pass scan was time-stamped and confirmed. Everything pointed in one direction, and still Marcus was not released. Instead, another officer entered the room, leaned toward Bradley, and said something low enough that Marcus couldn't fully hear. Bradley straightened. Then he reached for his handcuffs, and somewhere across the city those videos kept spreading. The supervisor's name was Lieutenant Gerald Moss. He arrived at the security office with the confident stride of someone expecting to walk into a manageable situation. Bradley met him at the door and spoke quickly, low voice, selective details, the version of events that made everything sound reasonable. Moss listened, nodded twice, then looked across the room at Marcus. Marcus sat straight in his chair, jacket still on, hands visible on the table in front of him. He had not been charged with anything. No violation had been identified. The access logs confirmed his entry. Renata's account was already on record. Every single piece of evidence in that room pointed toward one outcome. Moss chose a different one. He authorized temporary restraint. Bradley moved forward with the handcuffs and Marcus spoke. Not frantically, not with anger, but with the slow and certain delivery of a man who had spent 20 years in courtrooms and understood exactly what was unfolding in front of him. He told them they were making a mistake that was going to be very difficult to explain later. Nobody responded. The cuffs clicked into place. And for a long moment, nobody in that room said anything at all. Even Bradley was quiet. Even the officers who had followed orders all morning seemed to feel the weight of what had just happened pressing down on the air around them. Because somewhere between a vague complaint in an airport lounge and this moment, a senior state court judge with a clean record, valid credentials, and confirmed lounge access had been placed in handcuffs. No charge, no evidence, no justification, just assumptions that had been allowed to grow unchecked, unquestioned, and unopposed, until they had gone further than anyone in that room would be able to defend. And those videos were still spreading. The videos had been spreading for 40 minutes. By the time airport administration started paying attention, the clips had already moved well beyond social media. News desk inboxes were filling up. Legal forums were sharing the footage with commentary. People who had never heard of Hartsfield-Carver International Airport were watching a well-dressed man being walked out of an executive lounge in handcuffs. Credentials on the table, a lounge employee vouching for him, and an officer who hadn't listened to any of it. The comments were not kind. The first call came in to airport administration from a senior judicial administrator 3 states away who had recognized Marcus's face the moment the clip crossed her screen. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply stated who Marcus Whitfield was, what he represented, and that she expected someone in a position of authority to call her back within the hour. That call alone set off a quiet panic. Then state officials began reaching out to airport leadership directly. Measured, professional, and absolutely impossible to ignore. Then came the call that changed the temperature of every room in that building. It came from the chief judge's office. The message was brief and it was clear. The chief judge was aware of the situation. The chief judge expected an immediate update. And the chief judge's office would be monitoring the airport's response very closely going forward. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. But by the time it ended, airport directors were pulling access logs. Internal Affairs was being notified. Senior staff who had known about the situation for over an hour and had done nothing were suddenly moving very fast. Lieutenant Moss's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at the closed door of the security office where Marcus Whitfield was still sitting in handcuffs. And for the first time all morning, someone in that building looked genuinely afraid. They moved fast once the chief judge's office called. Senior airport executives arrived within 20 minutes. Legal advisors came shortly after. Badges clipped, folders open, faces carrying the tight expression of people doing damage control on something that had already gone too far to contain quietly. The bodycam footage was pulled first. They watched it without speaking. Every moment from the time Bradley walked through those frosted glass doors. Every exchange. Every dismissal. Renata confirming Marcus's access and Bradley telling her to step back. The credentials on the table. The handcuffs clicking into place. Then they pulled the access logs. Marcus Whitfield had scanned his boarding pass at 7:44 a.m. The system had cleared him immediately and automatically. His entry was valid, time-stamped, and completely authorized from the moment he walked through the door. Every escalation had been unnecessary. Every assumption had been wrong. The officers were brought in separately and questioned. Most gave careful answers, measured, aware that cameras and logs had already told a story that their words could not rewrite. Then it was Bradley's turn. The room waited, and Bradley, the man who had dismissed a lounge employee's confirmation, glanced past official judicial credentials, ignored access logs that were never even checked, called for backup, authorized restraint, and placed a senior court judge in handcuffs without a single piece of supporting evidence. Gave his explanation. He said he thought something felt off. That was it. No policy cited. No threat identified. No rule violation referenced. Just a feeling. The legal advisor across the table wrote something down slowly. One of the executives looked at the wall. Nobody said anything for a long moment, because there was nothing left to say. One sentence. One career-ending sentence, and Bradley had delivered it himself. The story did not stay inside that airport. Within days, national news outlets had picked up the footage. Civil rights organizations issued formal statements. Legal analysts appeared on television dissecting every moment. The dismissal of Renata's confirmation, the glance at the credentials, the handcuffs, and most of all, that single explanation Bradley had delivered in the review room. A formal investigation was launched within the week. The findings were swift and they were brutal. The access logs were clear. The bodycam footage was clear. Renata's account was clear. There had never been a reason to approach Marcus Whitfield, let alone detain him, let alone restrain him. Officer Bradley Connors was terminated. Lieutenant Moss received a formal disciplinary action that effectively ended any path to further promotion. Several supervisors who had been aware of the situation and moved too slowly were formally reprimanded. The airport rewrote its public complaint procedures entirely. Mandatory verification steps were introduced. requiring staff to confirm access records before any security contact could be initiated based solely on a passenger complaint. Marcus received a formal public apology from the airport's chief executive. He accepted it without theatrics. Months later, standing before a packed judicial conference, he delivered the statement that would follow this story wherever it was told. He said that authority exists to protect rights, not replace them. The room rose to its feet. Eventually, the airport returned to what airports always return to: departures and arrivals, rolling luggage and rushed goodbyes. The Pinnacle Executive Lounge reopened with new staff training and a quieter reputation. But the footage never disappeared. It lived online, watched, shared, and referenced in classrooms, courtrooms, and training sessions across the country. A permanent reminder that assumptions have consequences, and that sometimes the man being questioned is the one who understands the law better than everyone else in the room. Some lessons are only learned the hard way. What happened inside that airport lounge wasn't caused by a lack of information. The information was always there. A front desk scan, a time-stamped log, an employee who remembered checking him in personally. Everything needed to end this, available from the very beginning. But nobody stopped to verify it. And that is the most important lesson this story leaves behind. When assumptions replace facts, even authority becomes a liability. One question to the front desk. One look at the access log. 30 seconds. That was all it would have taken to prevent everything that followed.